I'm not the kind of man who looks for trouble. I built my life and my lakefront cabin for the exact opposite reason: peace, privacy, and the simple satisfaction of knowing I carved something real out of wood, sweat, and solitude. My name's Dexter Winslow. I'm a retired architect, Colorado native, and stubborn old bastard who doesn't take kindly to anyone poking around where they don't belong. I built the cabin back in the mid-90s with my own 2 hands. Back then, the land was pure. 5 acres of quiet lakeside, no neighbors within shouting distance, no noise but the wind in the trees and the call of loons. I'd been coming here every couple of months, ever since I stepped back from the drafting table for good. It's my sanctuary. The wood stove still crackles like it used to, and the dock still creaks under my boots just the same. Life, in its best form, doesn't ask much more than that. Things started to shift about 4 years ago when a new development crept up on the ridgeline across the lake, Oak View Summit. Overnight, a dozen identical homes sprang up like weeds in a perfect HOA grid, complete with white fences, manicured lawns, and people who wore yoga pants like they were a birthright. I didn't pay them much attention. Their subdivision didn't touch my land, and I had no reason to suspect they'd ever try to touch me. That changed one afternoon while I was cleaning out the fire pit in Denver. My phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. Against my better judgment, I picked up. "Hi, this is Angela from Larchmont Realty," the chirpy voice said. "We're scheduled for a property showing tomorrow at 2 p.m., just confirming access. The clients are very excited." I blinked. "Showing of what?" "Your cabin, the lakefront one, off County Route 17. We've got you down as the owner." "I am the owner, but I'm not selling anything." A beat of silence. "Well, we received a signed listing form from the Oak View Summit HOA. They claimed you'd delegated sale authority due to absentee ownership. The president said you'd be unavailable, but cooperative." My stomach dropped like a rock into the lake. "I never signed any damn listing," I snapped. "Cancel the showing. Do not set foot on my property. You hear me?" She stammered something, but I was already grabbing my truck keys and heading out the door. It's a 3-hour drive to the cabin, give or take, and I didn't stop once. Not for gas, not for coffee, not even when I passed a dead elk half straddling the shoulder. I had one thing on my mind. Who the hell thought they had the right to sell what wasn't theirs? The moment I turned off the county road onto my gravel drive, I saw it. A crisp, shiny, obnoxious, "For sale." Lakefront cabin sign stuck right next to my old wooden post. Bright red lettering, realtor logo, price tag, and a phone number. My stomach churned. The audacity. But it got worse. My gate was wide open. I hadn't given that code to anyone. Someone had clearly reset it. There were tire tracks in the gravel and even a bit of mud from some well-shined suburban tires that didn't belong here. I crept forward slowly, windows down, and sure enough, 2 strangers stood on my porch with smartphones in hand, snapping pictures of my front door like it was a listing on Zillow. A third person, holding a clipboard and fake smile, turned toward them and gestured toward the view. I parked and got out, trying to keep my voice even, though I could feel heat rising behind my ears. "Can I help you?" I asked sharply. The woman with the clipboard turned. "Are you Mr. Winslow? I'm Sherry, with Larchmont. These are our prospective buyers. The HOA granted us access." I nearly laughed. "Granted you access to my property?" "Yes, well, the president of the HOA—" "I'm not a member of any HOA," I cut in, stepping forward. "This property predates your whole damn subdivision. You're trespassing." The man next to her spoke up, clearly annoyed. "We were told the owner had stepped away from management, that the HOA had legal authority." I stared him down. "You were told wrong. You've got 10 seconds to clear out before I call the sheriff." That did the trick. The smiles melted. They gathered their brochures and phones, stumbling past me down the steps. One of them muttered something about wasting their time. I watched them drive off, the dust cloud trailing behind their black SUV like a guilty conscience. Then I turned back to my porch, took a deep breath, and yanked that gaudy sign out of the ground. Snapped it over my knee for good measure. I headed straight to the gate controls, reset the code, bolted the lock, and then walked the perimeter with a flashlight to check for any other surprises. Finally, I took an old plywood board, spray-painted a new message, and hammered it right where the for sale sign had been. Private property, not for sale. Trespassers will be prosecuted. The wind off the lake was cold that night, but my blood was boiling just fine on its own. I barely slept that night. Not from fear, hell no, but from sheer outrage. You don't spend 3 decades building something with your own hands, living off-grid, defending your corner of the earth, only to wake up one day and find that some entitled HOA queen decided to flip it like a fixer-upper. I kept replaying that scene on my porch over and over. The cameras, the buyers, the smug look on that agent's face like she was doing me a favor. By dawn, I'd already made a thermos of black coffee, grabbed my trail boots, and set out to double-check the whole property. I didn't want to find any more surprises left behind by Oakview Summit's real estate circus. The gate was secure, no new tracks, no signs of tampering. Still, I left a motion-activated trail cam facing the driveway, just in case someone thought they'd try a late-night sneak peek. Around 10, I heard tires crunching down the road again. I stood from the back porch and watched a silver Lexus SUV wind its way down the gravel like it owned the place. License plate had one of those HOA vanity frames. My stomach turned even before the door opened. And there she was, Karen Woolbridge. I'd only ever seen her in passing, maybe twice. Once at the general store, where she scolded a cashier for not bagging her kombucha fast enough, and once at the lake when she accidentally kayaked right up to my dock to ask if I offered short-term rentals. Never thought much of her, until now. She stepped out in pressed khakis and a fleece vest, marched right past the trespassing sign I'd nailed into the ground less than 12 hours earlier, and headed for the steps like she was walking into her own damn home. "Excuse me?" I barked. Karen halted, but only slightly. "Mr. Winslow," she said, her voice sugary with a blade underneath. "We need to talk." "No, you need to leave." "Oh, don't be dramatic." She waved her hand like I was a fly in her mimosa. "We're working with serious investors. You're jeopardizing an opportunity to elevate the entire district." "Elevate what?" I stepped off the porch and met her at the foot of the steps. "You mean steal private property?" She bristled. "Don't be ridiculous. Your cabin visually integrates with the Oakview Summit perimeter. We've received repeated complaints about the aesthetic discrepancy." I blinked. "You mean it doesn't look like your beige plastic boxes up on the hill?" She smirked. "The value of our homes is affected by what's adjacent. You haven't been seen here in over a year, so the board assumed you'd vacated the property or moved on. That gives you the right to break into my land, change the gate code, and parade strangers through my home?" Karen pulled a folder out of her leather bag and held it up. "I have full authority from the HOA board to act in the community's interest. We filed a proactive real estate initiative to reclaim underutilized parcels." I stared at her. "Reclaim? You think this is eminent domain?" "This isn't federal land, lady. This is mine. I have title, deed, survey maps, and 45 receipts from Home Depot to prove it." She didn't flinch. "Mr. Winslow, no one is saying you'll be evicted, but this community is growing. Change is inevitable. You can either be part of the vision or stand in the way of progress." I looked her dead in the eye. I built this place before your little cult of lawnmowers even existed. Your HOA has no jurisdiction here. Karen gave a tight smile. Well, we'll let the paperwork speak for itself. Then she turned and strolled back to her Lexus, like she hadn't just tried to annex a man's life. As she drove off, I noticed her slowing just enough to snap a photo of my gate and my freshly painted sign. I'm sure it was going in her little neighborhood newsletter under Community Obstacles. Back inside, I pulled every legal document I had out of my safe. The deed, the land survey, the original building permits from 1996, even the old topo maps. I scanned them all into my laptop, uploaded backups to cloud storage, and sent copies to my personal lawyer in Denver, though I knew I'd need someone with teeth for this mess. And it didn't stop there. That afternoon, I checked my voicemail and found 2 new messages. One from a different real estate agent saying he'd been referred by the Oakview board to handle showings. Another from a supposed developer rep asking when demolition could begin pending title clearance. My blood boiled. The kicker? My security app pinged me at 8 p.m. Motion detected near the back gate. I pulled up the camera feed and saw it. Someone had walked the perimeter with a flashlight, paused at my dock, and crouched down next to my trail cam. A second later, the feed cut out. They found it. Took it. That's when I realized this wasn't just overreach. This was coordinated. I wasn't going to let them steamroll me with HOA word salad and suburban entitlement. The next morning, I drove into town and parked in front of an old brick office above a barber shop. Inside, the place smelled like stale coffee and copier toner. A hand-painted sign on the frosted glass read, Lindsay Barrow, Property and Land Use Law. She came recommended by a former client of mine who once fought a golf course expansion and won. Lindsay looked like the kind of woman who'd been arguing with developers since the womb, mid-30s, sharp eyes, sleeves rolled to her elbows like she was ready to dig a trench or draft a lawsuit on a cocktail napkin. "Tell me everything," she said, spinning a legal pad around and clicking her pen. I laid it all out. The unauthorized showing, the fake listing, the gate code reset, the HOA's claims, Karen's little real estate crusade. She didn't flinch. When I showed her the messages from realtors and the strange night activity, she leaned back in her chair, lips tight. Sounds like attempted fraud, criminal trespass, and if that gate code was changed remotely, potentially unlawful access to private systems. Let's start by requesting everything they think they have in writing. We filed formal requests with both Larchmont Realty and the Oakview Summit HOA, citing state real estate laws and requesting documentation of any supposed contracts, power of attorney or property listings. 3 days later, we got the first batch. I opened the envelope at her office. Inside were copies of a fabricated resolution from the Oakview HOA board claiming authority to represent properties that affect visual value and market dynamics. A phony, limited sale authorization with my name at the bottom. A listing agreement with Larchmont Realty, supposedly signed by me 2 months prior. The signature on the document was a joke. My name was misspelled. Dexter Wenslow. The scrawl looked like it had been written by a drunk toddler wearing boxing gloves. Lindsay didn't laugh. She scanned the document, then quietly said, "They filed this under your parcel number, but the county clerk's office shows 0 transfers, 0 sale intention, and no activity on your lot for over a decade. There's nothing on record. This thing is dead on arrival." She didn't stop there. She pulled out her phone and called a contact at the Real Estate Licensing Board. By the time we left the office, there was already a preliminary complaint filed against the broker who'd conducted the fake showing. We drove straight to the sheriff's substation next, handed in a signed report, and requested an investigation into forgery, fraud, and unauthorized representation of private property. The deputy on duty raised an eyebrow when we told him the HOA might be behind it. He took it seriously, and that's when things got even weirder. By the following week, homeowners in Oakview Summit started getting HOA notices about emergency legal fund surcharges. Every household was suddenly being charged a few hundred extra dollars to address unexpected legal liabilities impacting the community's reputation. There was no mention of me by name, but the implication was clear. Karen was trying to monetize her legal mess. Some residents started posting about it in a local Facebook group. One guy even leaked a screenshot of an internal HOA message where Karen wrote, "We acted to protect the visual harmony of Oakview. Mr. Winslow's cabin will inevitably be absorbed into the next phase of development. We just accelerated the process." Lindsay's jaw tightened when she read that. "That's not just arrogance," she said. "That's conspiracy. She knew damn well your land was off limits, and she forged signatures to push the deal through. She's not just trying to cover her tracks. She's trying to finance the defense before the house burns down." We filed an expanded complaint, this time including criminal impersonation and attempted misappropriation of real property. Lindsay also began drafting a civil suit against both Karen personally and the HOA entity itself. She warned me, though, they'll fight back hard. Narcissists don't go down quietly. And she was right. That night, I got another alert from my security app. Motion behind the cabin, near the old canoe shed. When I reviewed the footage, I saw two silhouettes in hoodies, shining flashlights into the windows. One of them walked right up to the trail cam I'd reinstalled earlier that week. He stared directly into the lens. Then he reached up and yanked it clean off the tree. Only this time, I was ready. The real camera was mounted 10 feet above that one. I got it all. By this point, it was obvious that Karen wasn't just delusional. She was dangerous. She wasn't improvising. She had a playbook, and she'd used it before. I couldn't afford to play defense any longer. If I wanted to stop this thing for good, I had to hit back, not just legally, but publicly. So I called a friend in Denver, someone I hadn't seen since college, Rachel Hammond, now an investigative reporter with a regional news station, sharp, tenacious, and exactly the kind of person who could drag HOA tyranny into the daylight and make it bleed. We met at a diner just outside of town. I brought copies of the fake documents, trail cam footage, HOA letters, and even that screenshot of Karen's little Facebook manifesto about my land being inevitably absorbed. Rachel took one look and said, "This smells like real estate, racketeering disguised as community service. Give me a week." She worked fast. Within days, she tracked down two other property owners near Oakview Summit who said Karen had approached them on behalf of the HOA while they were out of town. In both cases, they'd returned to find friendly letters suggesting that their land be considered for recreational redevelopment. One of them even found a realtor's card shoved between their screen door and frame. Meanwhile, Lindsay and I were preparing a strategic countermove, something Karen wouldn't see coming. Lindsay had a connection to an actor in Boulder named Angelo who specialized in undercover investigative work. We gave him a backstory: Midwestern investor, flush with crypto money, looking to buy large parcels near up-and-coming communities. He even had fake business cards made. We sent word through a third party that a wealthy buyer was very interested in the lakefront cabin, and possibly more of the surrounding properties, if someone could facilitate off-market access. Sure enough, within 72 hours, Karen herself reached out to set up a private meeting. It took place in a coffee shop across town. Neutral ground. Angelo wore a designer hiking vest, sunglasses on the collar, and a charming Midwestern smile that would disarm a pit bull. Hidden in his frame glasses was a miniature 4K pinhole camera, plus a mic rig under his collarbone. Everything was recorded. Karen arrived with her real estate contact, the same woman who'd trespassed during the original showing. They ordered herbal tea and got to work. What she said was gold. She talked about streamlining the paperwork to avoid having to bother old owners. She said things like, "We've already drafted 3 authorizations. One of them was creatively handled. The Winslow property? That's a technicality. It's practically within HOA visual limits. If this plays out right, we can rezone the whole ridge as a collective residential cluster. Easier to sell in bulk." She even offered to have someone from the board forge an owner's consent letter to speed up the sale. Said it had worked before. Angelo played it cool, nodded, smiled, asked how much of a donation to the HOA fund would be helpful. She grinned. The next morning, Lindsay and I reviewed the footage. I felt like I was watching a true crime documentary starring the woman who nearly stole my life. Lindsay sat back in her chair, stunned. "She's not just reckless," she muttered. "She's industrializing this." We sent the video to Rachel. She knew exactly what to do. 3 days later, the story broke. HOA president accused of real estate fraud. Secret recordings reveal forged listings. Predatory tactics. The article went viral. It led with my case, complete with images of the original for sale sign, the fake documents, the night vision footage from my trail cam. Then it detailed Karen's recorded admissions, her plans to rezone and absorb private property into the HOA under false pretenses. There were screenshots, quotes, one hell of a headline. Oakview Summit's private Facebook group exploded. Comments poured in. Several residents expressed shock. Some admitted they'd always had suspicions, and a few posted that they too had been approached by Karen inappropriately. But not everyone was shocked. A woman named Janet Long, the HOA's treasurer, quietly reached out to Lindsay through a throwaway email account. Her message was short. "I have access to internal documents and board communications. Karen's been doing this longer than anyone knows. I want to help." Suddenly, we had an insider. The fallout came faster than I expected. The day after the article dropped, HOA members began demanding an emergency board meeting. Karen went radio silent, but her vice president, a nervous man named Tyler who always looked like he'd been yelled at one too many times, posted an announcement. The board is aware of the misleading coverage and urges calm until clarification is available. Clarification? That woman admitted to forging property consents on video. But I knew Karen, the kind of person who doesn't apologize. She strikes back. Sure enough, within 48 hours, she did. I was sitting at my desk, sorting through digital copies of all our evidence, when Lindsay forwarded me an email with the subject, "New evidence submitted by Oakview HOA." Attached was a link to a video clip. I opened it. My jaw clenched. There I was, sitting on my porch, wearing a flannel I hadn't seen in years, speaking into the camera. "Yeah, I've been meaning to sell, just haven't found the time to get around to it. If the HOA wants to help, I'm not against it. Let them run it. Whatever works." I paused it and stared. It wasn't real. The lighting was wrong. The voice was off. And I never said those words. Not then, not ever. But damn if it didn't look convincing. Lindsay called me the second she watched it. They used a deep fake. I've seen this tactic in corporate disputes, but not like this. This is desperate. We sent the video to a forensic analyst in Boulder, someone Lindsay had worked with on a land dispute involving drone surveillance. Within 24 hours, he confirmed it. The mouth movements were algorithmically generated. The voice was AI reconstructed from a podcast interview I did 10 years ago. The background image was a composite of my porch pulled from online photos. We filed an emergency injunction and reported the fake to both the sheriff and the district attorney's office. Lindsay's tone shifted. No more measured legalese. She was furious. "They're trying to manufacture consent from thin air," she said. "This is obstruction, impersonation, and possibly tampering with evidence." Meanwhile, Janet, our mole inside the HOA, sent over a flash drive. It contained financial records Karen had kept off the books. Multiple payments labeled as consulting made to personal accounts. HOA funds wired to a law firm in Nevada for advisory services with no contract attached. A line item labeled video production assistance, non-budgetary. That last one made my skin crawl. The sheriff's department called later that evening. They'd obtained a search warrant for both Karen's home and the HOA office. One of the deputies even told me, "We don't usually get this kind of cooperation from residents. Your camera work helped." I went to bed that night with my phone on the nightstand, half expecting the cabin to go up in flames. But it was quiet, too quiet. The warrants came through faster than expected. Less than 48 hours after we submitted the deepfake analysis, deputies rolled up to the Oakview HOA office in 3 marked cruisers and a nondescript black SUV. Karen wasn't there. Yet. But Tyler was. Poor guy looked like he might pass out when they started boxing up files and hauling hard drives out the front door. About an hour later, they hit her house. Rachel was already outside, camera crew ready, microphone in hand. This wasn't just a legal affair anymore. It was a public spectacle. Karen stepped out onto her porch in a silk robe and designer sunglasses, as if she were attending her own scandal. When the cuffs came out, though, the mask cracked. She tried to yank her arm away, cursed loud enough for the whole street to hear. The search turned up everything we needed and more. Inside her HOA office desk drawer, 7 forged owner consents, each with inconsistencies in signatures. 3 blank authorization templates, ready to fill in. A list of targeted properties, labeled high visual impact, likely absentee. Mine was circled in red. On her laptop, email chains between her and the deepfake producer. Someone billing themselves as a reputation management specialist. Multiple conversations with her real estate partners discussing how to phase out non-HOA eyesores. -A. Spreadsheet showing over $137,000 in undocumented HOA adjustments, rerouted through ghost vendors. When Janet learned what was found, she broke down crying. "I tried to stop her. I really did," she told Lindsay through tears. "But she threatened me, said I'd lose everything." Her testimony was powerful, and it mattered. A week later, the DA's office filed multiple felony charges against Karen Woolbridge, including real estate fraud, forgery, criminal impersonation, wire fraud, conspiracy to defraud property owners, misuse of community funds. The judge denied bail, said she was a high-level manipulator with access to community resources and influence. That part stung Karen's pride more than the handcuffs. Meanwhile, the residents of Oakview Summit held a vote, a special session to dissolve the HOA entirely. 2/3 majority required. They reached it in under 10 minutes. Janet was asked to assist with the disbanding process, this time as an independent community treasurer, not under HOA control. I didn't attend that meeting. I had no interest in watching a machine cannibalize itself. But Janet stopped by the cabin the next day to thank me. She brought fresh apple muffins and handed me a sealed envelope. Inside was a formal letter of apology. signed by over 24 Oakview residents. Not that I needed it, but still. The air felt different after the HOA collapsed, not just metaphorically. The sounds of forced order were gone. No more identical lawnmowers buzzing at 9 a.m. sharp. No more patrols of clipboard-wielding volunteers checking mailbox heights or the color of someone's shutters. Oakview Summit looked the same, but it breathed differently. Looser. Like it had finally let out a sigh it had been holding since the first welcome packet went out. I spent the following weeks doing exactly what I came out here to do in the first place. Nothing. I fished, fixed a loose shutter, repaired a cracked stair on the dock, took naps in my hammock like a man who had earned them in blood and affidavits. Occasionally I'd check my email just to watch the slow trickle of HOA-related lawsuits piling up in the court docket. Half the town was turning on each other. The rest were just pretending they'd never voted for Karen in the first place. As for her, she was still in county lockup awaiting trial. Her lawyer filed 3 separate motions to dismiss the charges, each denied. When the press started digging into her past, they found she'd pulled similar stunts in 2 other neighborhoods before this one. Lesser scale, fewer cameras, same playbook. The kicker? That fake video of me, the deepfake, somehow ended up on a shady real estate testimonial site for a day before it got pulled. Apparently, her tech guy forgot to unplug from his other scams. Rachel had a field day with that one. From HOA villain to virtual puppet, she wrote in the follow-up piece. One morning, while sipping coffee on the porch, I heard a knock at the gate. Not the front door. The gate. I walked out, and there stood Tyler, the former HOA vice president, holding a small cardboard box. "Thought you might want this," he said sheepishly. "Found it under Karen's desk, labeled Winslow. Contingency." I didn't look inside. I took it, nodded. "Thanks." He started to turn away, then paused. "You were right, you know, about all of it." "Didn't take a genius," I said. "Just someone who paid attention." After he left, I opened the box. Inside, a printed map with property lines redrawn to include my land. A mock listing sheet with me listed as inactive owner, motivated. And, I swear to God, a color brochure draft that described my cabin as a rustic asset with investment appeal. I laughed. A real one. Long and loud. That afternoon, I went to the gate, took down my old plywood warning sign, and replaced it with something new. Custom-made, etched into steel, bolted to the post with half-inch screws that weren't going anywhere. Not for sale. Not for HOA. Not for Karen. A few days later, a young couple hiked past, paused, read the sign, and burst out laughing. One of them shouted, "Legendary man!" Damn right. Then I went back to my dock, opened a beer, and watched the sun dip into the lake like it always had. Uninterrupted, ungoverned, and absolutely, irrevocably mine.